Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's the VA pension. A lot of people don't know about this benefit, and so what I want to do this morning is share with you something I think you'll find very interesting today. And so just before we get started, I want to introduce who I am. My name is Marcy Johnson, and I am an attorney. I do estate planning and elder law. I'm also an accredited attorney with the VA, which means that I have been authorized by the Veterans Administration to not only talk about this program, but also to offer strategies in order to become eligible for this program. And the name of our firm is the Johnson Firm, and I am licensed here in Texas and also in Arizona, and we have offices in both states, all across the state. And what makes our firm unique is that we're a family-owned firm. My partner is also my dad. Richard Johnson, and he works with me. So we do only estate planning and elder law. And what I do is to explain what elder law is, how I explain it is, I help stressed out families who are worried about how they're going to pay for the long-term care costs. And I help them protect and preserve those assets so that they can get on governmental benefits that will pay for that care. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit this morning. Now, I'm going to be throwing a lot of numbers at you, but don't worry, you don't have to write that down. I have got a book that I wrote that you are more than welcome to download for free off of our website. And so I've got our website up there. You can go to vapension.com or the Johnson or www.johnsonfirmpc.com and go to download books, and you will find this book, and everything that I am saying today is in here. So you don't have to take a lot of notes if you don't want to. And also I have some other resources on my website. We do Medicaid planning as well, and just general estate planning. So we've got several books and several resources, which I think could be useful to you. So feel free to go to our website and download those and follow along. But let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. And let's talk about the VA pension. And so I'm really surprised by the number of people who have never heard of the VA pension. And this is a program that is designed to help seniors pay for the long-term care costs. It's tax-free money. And if you qualify, you could be looking at getting anywhere between $25,000 and $30,000 tax-free for the rest of your life. Now, do you know anyone who might be interested in that? I know that I would be. So you don't have to be career military in order to get this benefit. You're not limited to using even VA facilities. You can go to your own doctors, you can go to your own, you can choose what type of care that you want to get in any assisted living facility or skilled nursing facility. You're not limited to just VA hospitals and such. It's just tax-free money to help pay for your long-term care. Now, you may be familiar with what's called VA compensation, and that's disability compensation. So if you are injured during your time in service, a lot of times you get what's called a disability rating, and you can receive compensation because of that injury. This has nothing to do with that. So your illnesses or your injuries don't relate back to your time in service at all. So why would the VA offer tax-free money to help pay for long-term care? Well, it's because long-term care is expensive. Now, I see that my screen, I don't know if it shows up on yours, but my picture may be cutting off some of my screen here, but the name of this slide is how much does long-term care cost? And if you don't know, I want us to be all on the same page. It's kind of expensive. And so I pulled this information from Genworth. Genworth is a big healthcare conglomerate. They did a survey back in 2020. They went around the country to all different regions and averaged what the cost of care was for that community. You are more than welcome to go to Google this survey, and you can type in any place, anywhere in the nation and find out what the average cost of care is. I chose Phoenix for this illustration, but you will see, this is the numbers here for 2022, that for a nursing home, you're looking at about $6,611 a month to pay for nursing home care. That is about $79,325 annually. Now, if you look at assisted living, it's a little bit less. We're looking at about $4,094 monthly, or $49,131 annually. You've got adult daycare here at a little over $2,000. Home health aide is someone who actually comes into the house. So, I mean, that's pretty expensive. That's almost as much as skilled nursing. But the point of this slide is just to show you that long-term care is expensive. And remember, these are just averages. You'll find nursing homes or assisted living facilities higher and lower, but this is just the average. Well, what's interesting to look at this slide is that this is just for one person. So if you are married and you're the one going into the nursing home, if you're paying $80,000 a year for that living situation, you've still got a healthy spouse back at home. In order for them to keep their standard of living in the home and paying all the household expenses, I mean, you could add easily another $30,000, $40,000 to this. And so when we look at these numbers, if you're spending $80,000 in the skilled nursing and you've got another $40,000 for your spouse at home, $120,000 spent year after year after year. I mean, think about your nest egg that you've spent your whole life building. And if we were to chip away at that at, $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 a year, or even assisted living, if we were chipping it away at $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, how long would your assets last? I mean, really, sadly for most Americans, they may not last as long as you think. And so again, this slide isn't there to scare you. It's just that this could really become an issue that we need to talk about. So that's why we're here today, is to talk about, how can we pay for long-term care? What are our options? And so we've got several ways in which we can pay for long-term care. Most people think that they're going to private pay. And as we just saw on the last slide, you can pay out of your assets and savings, and you may have to, but just how long will those assets last? Maybe you can do it for a little while, but how long? Maybe you're fortunate enough to have children or other family members who are willing to take you in or offer payment for those services, but most of us aren't that fortunate to have a situation or family members like that. Another option is that you can buy long-term care insurance. And long-term care insurance is great if you've got it. I highly encourage you to keep it. But the biggest concern I hear about long-term care insurance is that it's expensive. And it is. I mean, it can easily cost you $6,000 or $7,000 a year as an annual premium. And that's a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But it's relative, because when you look at a nursing home costing $6,000 a month, if you only have to pay $6,000 a year for long-term care insurance, maybe it's not as expensive as it may have originally seemed. But again, long-term care insurance isn't for everybody. It is a big premium payment, and maybe you just can't afford that payment right now. Or maybe you've already got a health situation in which you wouldn't qualify to be insurable. And if that's not the case, then what other options do we have? So if we don't want to pay, or even if we can pay, we may not be able to pay very long. We don't have long-term care insurance. You know, the best time to buy insurance was yesterday. And if we waited too long or can't get that insurance, then our only other option is to look at governmental programs. And the three big governmental programs that are out there are Medicare, Medicaid, and the Veterans Pension, which we're going to talk about today. I put Medicare up here really just as a reminder to tell you that Medicare is not a viable option. You know, it's an insurance program. Its purpose is to help pay for hospital stays or co-pays to the doctor, prescription drug costs. It's not meant to pay for residential long-term care living. Now, there are instances in which it will pay for a nursing home if for acute care, for a one-time injury. If you had, let's say, a hip replacement, and then after surgery, the doctor wanted you to go to rehab, and so you went to a skilled nursing facility for 3 or 4 weeks, Medicare may have picked up that tab. They'll pay 100% of the copay for 20 days. But then between day 21 and 99, it's a prorated rate. But after day 100, you're completely on your own. So a lot of people think that Medicare will help with their long-term care costs, and not residential long-term care costs. So I put Medicare up there just to let you know, don't count on it. Medicaid is another option that you can look at to help pay for your for your long-term care costs. Medicaid really is for skilled nursing level of care. I do a whole workshop on Medicaid, and I'd be glad to talk to you about that more privately. But today we're going to focus on the VA pension. And so, again, let's go back. Why are we talking about the VA pension anyway? Well, it's because most people don't know about it. But what it is, it's a program that offers tax-free money if you meet their requirements. And like I said, the VA doesn't want veterans or their surviving spouses to go impoverished paying for their long-term care. So if you can meet some tests, some qualifications, then they'll assist you with those costs. So who is the VA pension for? It's for veterans with wartime service, or it's available for a surviving spouse whose deceased spouse was a veteran with wartime service. When is it available? It's available when the applicant, the one applying, is age 65 or older, and we can show that they need assistance paying for those long-term care costs. And again, why is it available? Well, it's available because we're going to show to the VA that your income is less than what you're paying out in medical expenses. And looking at your assets, you don't have enough to pay for long-term care over an extended period of time. So that's why the VA offers this program. And how do you get it? Well, you need to talk to a VA accredited attorney like myself and file a claim showing eligibility. So let's go into these and break this down just a little bit more. Now, when we talk about the qualifications to get the VA pension, I describe them as tests that you have to pass. Now, if you Google or look into any sort of VA information, you are not going to see the word test anywhere. But this is just a way that I find it's easier to explain if we pass tests. So the first test that we have to pass is what's called a service test. And this is the most important, because if we don't pass this test, then we can't continue to look at this benefit. So the service test is that the veteran must have served 90 days active duty. And one of those days was during a period of war. And you had to have been discharged from anything other than dishonorable. So that could be honorable, general, or medical discharge. Now, you do not have to have seen, the veteran did not have to have physically seen combat. There just had to have been a war going on with the United States for one day during their time of service. So, what are the dates of war? Now, these are specific dates. We've got World War II, which is December 7th, 1941 through December 31st, 1946. The Korean War is June 27th, 1950 through January 31st, 1955. Now, the Vietnam War is August 5th, 1964 through May 7th, 1975. Now, however, the VA has extended the time frame for the Vietnam War if you were actually in country of Vietnam between November 1st, 1955 and August 4th, 1964, then that would count as serving during the Vietnam War. And then the Persian Gulf is August 2nd, 1990 until the present, because they haven't officially declared, the VA hasn't officially declared that the Persian Gulf War is over. When I talk about the VA pension today, I'm only talking about World War II, Korean, and the Vietnam War, because the Persian Gulf has different requirements. Instead of 90 days active service, 1 day during wartime, you had to serve 24 months continuous. So the rules are a little bit different. And since most of them aren't age 65 yet, we're going to focus on just the rules for the three previous, the wars up here, World War II, Korean, and Vietnam. Now, if you don't know the actual dates that you served, you need to look at your separation papers. They're also called the DD-214. And that is that's the name of the form in which it lists your times of service. And so it has DD-214 at the bottom. So a lot of people call it the DD-214. So if you don't have these discharge papers or you can't find them, you can request them from the Federal Archives. I believe that website is archives.gov. And you just need to enter some information about the veteran, their time of service, their branch of service, and approximate dates that they served. And the VA will look for those, for that discharge paper and send it to you free of charge. Now, I will say right now they're kind of backed up. It takes several months. It can take several months for you to get those papers, but it's very important to look at those. If you decide to apply for this benefit, you're going to need it anyway because we have to send that to the VA. But I have had families come to me and say, oh, you know, my spouse didn't qualify, they served in the reserves, or they weren't within these dates. And then when we actually get the DD-214 and we look, we find out, oh, well, yeah, they were in the reserves, but they did serve 3 months active duty, and it just happened to fit during this time frame. So always check the DD-214, the separation papers, before deciding that you don't meet this requirement. So let's assume that we do meet this requirement. We do serve, it just had to be 1 day. If we were in World War II and let's say someone enlisted on December 31st, 1946, and then served, for a couple of years after that. I mean, because 1 day was during wartime, they meet this test. So it's very precise, but it's definitely worth checking out the numbers. So let's assume that they do meet the requirement for wartime. So we met the service test. So the next test that we need to look at is the asset test. And so to get this benefit, we have to show that our assets would not sustain our medical expenses for a long period of time. So to meet the asset test for this year, 2022, we have to show that our assets are less than $138,489 in countable assets. Now, a couple things that I want to point out about these words specifically. So you'll notice that 138,049 is an exact number, and it is very exact. Well, this number corresponds with the Medicaid numbers of what you can have as a community spouse, as a spouse not in a nursing home, what they can have and their spouse still qualify for Medicaid. So these numbers go hand in hand with Medicaid. So they're trying to get both of the programs to be more similar. But because it is exact, this number changes every year. So with inflation, next year in December, they'll release the new numbers, and it usually goes up about 3%. So, you know, the number was about 135,000 last year. It's 138,000 this year. It'll probably be 140,000 and some change next year. But it also includes countable assets. So we're talking about countable. So that's a key word. So again, this comes from the Medicaid world. So if something is countable, that means that something is not countable. And so what does countable mean? So in the Medicaid and VA world, they say anything that you can readily turn into cash to pay for your care is countable. So that's bank accounts, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, your IRA, that's life insurance, the cash value of life insurance, any real estate besides your home. Now, the VA doesn't care if it doesn't make sense to cash in those assets. You know, if you cash in an IRA, you're going to have to pay tax. You may have some tax hits. Well, VA doesn't care about that. But the fact that if you can cash it in to pay for your care, then it's countable. And so if there are countable assets, that means then that there are non-countable assets. And so things that the VA does not count is your homestead, a car. It doesn't matter whether that car is a Ford or a Ferrari. You're allowed to have one automobile, and all your personal effects, just your stuff in your house. They don't count that. But if you know anyone who looked at the VA pension before 2018, the numbers, the asset test was completely different. You could only have, if you were single, you could only have $40,000 roughly. If you were married, you could only have $80,000. They completely overhauled the VA program in October of 2018. And so if you know anyone who looked at this test 3 or 4 years ago, I encourage them to look at it again, because the whole program was completely overhauled. So again, for the asset test, we have to show that you have less than 138,489 in countable assets for if you're going to apply this year. Again, that number will go up, but that's what it is for this year. So let's give an example. If you have someone who owns a home, let's say $700,000 home, they have a car, but as long as they have less than 138,049 in assets, then they would meet this test. You know, they could have $1 million home. It doesn't matter the value of the home for VA. Okay. Now, this is where I know this is virtual, so I can't see your faces, but if I was doing this presentation live in person, which I do a lot, it's about this time that I see people in the audience, their eyes start to glaze over, and they look at this number and they think to themselves, I have a lot more than that. I don't qualify for this program. I'm out. How soon can I politely get up and leave? And so I encourage you, if you have more than 138,049 in countable assets, then just bear with me and just hold on, because I have some solutions that we can look at that can help you if you have considerable assets more than this amount. So don't tune me out. There's still a chance. So, but this is the asset test, okay? Then we've got one more test. So this is the income test. So remember, we have the service test, we have the asset test, and now we have the income test. And I will tell you, of all the tests to pass, if you know anyone who's applied for VA and they were denied, it's usually because of this test. And it's because the VA doesn't explain it very well. And I don't think they have a lot of intention to do so. So this is where most people get hung up. And so we've got to show that the income received from all sources is less than our unreimbursed medical expenses paid. Okay, we're gonna break that down in just a minute. Well, what's an unreimbursed medical expense? Well, that's any expense not covered by insurance. So examples of that are your health insurance premiums. And if you had long-term care insurance, you know, those premiums, if you hadn't turned on your long-term care policy. So if you're paying, let's say Blue Cross Blue Shield for a supplemental health insurance policy, you're paying $300 a month for that. That's an unreimbursed medical expense that you're paying. Wages paid to a caregiver. If you have a caregiver coming into the house, his or her wages are unreimbursed. So we can use that amount as a in this calculation. Assisted living costs, skilled nursing costs, all those are examples of unreimbursed medical expenses. Now, when we talk about income received from all sources, let's take an example. That's your Social Security. That's your pension if you have one. If you have an IRA, this includes your required minimum distribution that you receive every year. And even if you only get it once a year, we divide it by 12, to get the monthly amount. So all this boils down to a math problem. And so we add up all of your income, we add up all of your unreimbursed medical expenses, and we see if the unreimbursed medical expense stack is higher than your income stack. So as an example, let's say you get, for Social Security, you get $1,800 in Social Security a month, maybe a pension of $200 a month. So total income for the month is $2,000. If you were in a assisted living facility and the assisted living facility was $5,500 a month, well, $5,500 is greater than $2,000. So our unreimbursed medical expenses are higher than our income, and we meet this test. So really, it all comes down to a math problem. Now, if you meet the asset test, you meet the income test, and you meet the service test, then you are entitled to the base pension amount. And that base pension amount is what's in blue there at the bottom, which is $18,320 a year, which comes out to be about $1,610 a month, which isn't bad. You know, I sure would like an extra $1,600 every month, to help pay for your care. So a lot of times, if the veteran is healthy but their spouse is sick, we've got a lot of unreimbursed medical expenses for a spouse. The health is determined by the veteran, not the spouse. So we've got all these unreimbursed medical expenses for the spouse of the veteran. They could get base pension. But most of the time when people come to me, if we're going to look at this VA pension, they want to get the absolute maximum amount of pension available. And that's the aid in attendance. You'll see that there in red. And so, $18,320 at the base level is nice, but how do I get the $29,175? Well, that's aid in attendance. And a lot of times you'll hear the VA pension called aid in attendance. That's a misnomer, but that's what people call it because that's what everyone's trying to get. So if we want to get aid in attendance, then there's an extra test that we have to try to pass. And that is a health test. And in order to pass the health test, we need to show the VA that we need assistance with at least 2 activities of daily living. Now, and activities of daily living is a coin term you hear in the medical field. And there's 5 core activities of daily living. It's dressing, bathing, standing and walking, getting up from a seated position, walking across the room. Eating is hand to mouth eating, and then toileting, so incontinence issues. So if we can show that we need help with at least 2 of these activities of daily living, then the VA will bump up our pension amount to the aid and attendance level, and we'll receive that amount. Now, a lot of people, when I go over the qualifications for activities of daily living, a lot of times they'll tell me, well, I don't need assistance with any of those. And maybe you don't. And if you don't, that's great. But it is very rare that I have met someone who said they didn't meet these qualifications and they actually didn't. So when we look at these requirements for the health test, you have to expand your mind and think outside of the box, because I have seen family members receive aid and attendance for things that they wouldn't normally have thought would have qualified. For example, let's take bathing, for example. If you have bars in your shower, or you have a stool in which to sit down, and we can show with a doctor's note that you hold on to those bars because you're a fall risk, you get dizzy in the shower, you get tired standing for that long a period, or you're just afraid you're going to slip and fall. Well, if you hold on to those showers or sit on that stool, that can arguably be called assistance with bathing. And so I would argue that you meet the bathing test. And I have seen the VA agree with me and give aid and attendance because we had bars in the shower and we were using them. If you use a cane or a walker, or if you need to hold on to someone for balance, that's assistance with standing and walking. I've had clients that have arthritis and they can't open their medication bottles. That's assistance with medication management. If they, again, with arthritis, if they can't tie their shoelaces well and they just need a little help, that's assistance with dressing. This doesn't mean that you need complete help with activities of daily living. This just means that you could benefit from some help. It doesn't mean you can't do it on your own. It's just, given the chance, you would benefit from having help. And so again, a lot of people look at this and say, oh, well, I don't need any help. And very rarely have I found that someone really doesn't qualify for some assistance with these activities. What else do I tell you about this? This is not even an exhausted list. Dementia, if you have dementia, high blood pressure, diabetes. I mean, it all boils down to a doctor's letter. And if we can get a doctor to substantiate, what we're claiming that you need assistance, then, you meet this test, and then we can look to getting this highest amount, which is the $29,175, or which is if you're married. So the numbers are different. So this is for married. If you're married, $29,175 annually, or $2,431 monthly. Now, if you are single, it's a little bit lower. This is for the veteran only. So veteran who's married or a single veteran. I'll talk about surviving spouse in a minute. So single veteran can get $24,610 annually, or $2,050 a month. Now, this slide is important for another reason. A lot of my clients come to me and they are already receiving disability compensation. So they were hurt they're suffering from some sort of injury that they've related back to their time during service. And so they've got a disability rating. And so they're already receiving something from the VA each month. It's called compensation. And I showed them these numbers and I asked them, you know, if you are rated 50%, usually 50% or lower, it's worth taking a look at these numbers, because while you can't get both compensation and pension, you can switch between the two programs. And a lot of times, if you're rated 10, 20%, well, like I said, up to 50% even, we just have to see what the monthly amount is you could receive under pension versus what you're already receiving. And a lot of times it makes more sense to switch. I was talking with a family recently who the veteran was suffering from hearing loss. I think was rated 10 or 15% disabled. It was getting about $200-300 a month in compensation. And when we looked at his overall health and, you know, what a doctor would say regarding, you know, what he could and couldn't do, and looking at their assets, you know, we could, he was married, so we could go from that $300 a month up to $2,431 a month if we just switched programs. So he was all for switching programs. And we can do that. Now, you can't get both, like I said, but you can get one or the other. So that's why it's so important to look at these numbers, because often it makes sense to switch. Now, as I alluded to earlier, when we're looking at aid and attendance, the health is based on the veteran alone. It's not the spouse's health is not considered in the rating to get aid and attendance. So if the veteran is healthy, but they have a very sick spouse, we can get the base amount, but we can't get the aid and attendance because, again, the health is based on the veteran. The doctor's note is based on the veteran, not the spouse. But you could still get benefit, just not the higher level. Once the veteran becomes disabled and needs more assistance, then we might be able to jump that up to aid and attendance at a later time. But in those situations where the veteran is healthy, but the spouse is not, it's still worth looking at the benefit, but you probably will not get the highest level of aid and attendance. So that's the benefit for a veteran that's living. Now, we also can get this benefit for surviving spouse, and that's called the death pension. And for a surviving spouse to get this pension, there's a couple additional eligibility tests. So they had to be married to the veteran at the time of the veteran's death and not remarried, okay? Now, it does not mean that the surviving spouse had to be married to the veteran when they served during wartime. I have multiple families in which this surviving spouse is the second, third, sometimes even the fourth spouse. So it doesn't matter what number you are in the marriage cycle, just as long as you're the one who was married to that veteran when they died. So now we do have to show marriage history. So if you do have a situation in which there are multiple marriages and you want to apply for this benefit, you might start gathering marriage certificates and divorce decrees or death certificates, because we're going to have to prove that you were the final spouse. So had to be married to the veteran at the time of the veteran's death, not remarried. And then the deceased veteran still had to meet all of the service requirements. And then the surviving spouse will still have to meet the asset and income requirements. But if we meet all those requirements, then you can see, if we're looking at aid and attendance, it's about half of what he or she would have received, if their veteran was alive. So for surviving spouse getting 80 attendance, about $1,318, which is 15,816 annually, which is, you know, which is great. I mean, this is just a game changer for so many male families. And, the extra income just allows them to stay at home longer, receive better care, and just take some of the stress off. I've had multiple instances where families, I just am so grateful that I can help families with the burden of their long-term care, and to get this benefit that they don't even know about. A lot of them say, they don't believe me until they see it, but once they see it, they're strong believers. And so that is the VA pension. Those are the rules, and that's how you get the VA pension. So before we close today, I want to talk about, well, what if you don't qualify for the VA pension? What if, when we were going through some of those tests, you didn't pass them? So let's go over that. We'll talk about that a little bit. So let's start at the bottom. What if you don't have any health issues? You are healthy as a horse. There is nothing wrong with you. Even we get a doctor's letter, there is absolutely nothing wrong. Well, that is, first of all, that's great news. Absolutely great news. We don't want to create something that's not there. So if you don't have any health issues for us to get that aid in attendance, then we just want to make sure that we position your assets so that when your health declines, and statistically, all of our health is going to decline at some points before we pass, that our assets are in line so we can get the benefit as soon as possible. So no health issues, position the assets so when they're available, we can apply. Now, what if you have too much income? Well, there's a couple of things we can do. We have to look at what is the income that's too much. I had a client not too long ago that she was retired, but she was doing some small work on the side. She was getting a 1099 of about, $500-600 a year, just to keep her busy. But when we looked at her Social Security and her pension and this little 1099 that she was getting each year, her income was more than her unreimbursed medical. So when we looked at it, and we realized that if we quit her job, this little volunteer job, basically, that she was, getting a few dollars here and there for the year, if we quit that job, she would be upside down. And so in that sense, it made sense for her to decide it was time to retire from that job and apply for VA pension. And then, she met the income requirement. So we've got to look at what the income is. Can we stop the income? That's a question. But what if we don't have enough unreimbursed medical expenses? We look at your healthcare premiums. A lot of people don't realize they're already paying one unreimbursed medical expense, and that comes out of your Social Security before you even hit your bank account, and that's Medicare Part B, which this year is $170.10. That comes out of your Social Security before you even hit your bank account. A lot of people don't realize that. Also, Medicare Part D, if you've got a prescription drug program, a lot of times that's taken out before it hits your bank account. So we add those numbers up. But a lot of times when we add up the premiums, we add up the Medicare Part B, the D, we're not high enough. We're not upside down yet. So we got to look at and see, how much are we not upside? How much room do we have to work with? If it's just a couple $100, sometimes it may make sense to change our insurance plan, to offer more coverage. We pay a little bit more in our premium, and then we meet this requirement. So, there's just little tweaks that we can do maybe to tip the scales. A lot of times, what I do for clients, if they don't have enough unreimbursed medical, is we look to create unreimbursed medical expenses where none existed before. For example, for a lot of families that come to me are in this typical situation in which mom and dad, one of them's a veteran, mom and dad are retired. They're having some issues, not big issues, but they've got children that live nearby, and the children check on them. They maybe go to the grocery store for them. They take them to their doctor's appointments, make sure that, they're safe and, they're receiving all the care that they need. Well, your children are doing that out of love and affection. Well, what if we paid your child to be your caregiver, and we actually paid them for the responsibility of taking on the oversight of your care? And so a lot of times, if we have that situation, we can create some unreimbursed medical expenses that weren't there before. So that's one way that we can help meet this requirement. Now, what if you've got too many assets? So remember that number I told you that a lot of people glaze over, that 138,489. If you have more than that in countable assets, then the question becomes, well, how much more? If we're just talking about, $20,000, $30,000 more, we can look at paying off any debt that you have. Do you still have a mortgage that you're paying? Well, let's pay off the mortgage. Let's pay off that credit card debt, spend down, and that will get us closer to that limit number. Maybe we purchase some exempt assets. If you haven't paid for your prepaid burial, we could buy that. If your car is, several years old, maybe it's time for an upgrade. We could spend money on a new car. We could remodel the house to make it more elder friendly, so that there's bigger access in the walkways and such, a walk-in tub or walk-in shower to make things more convenient as you age in place. So there's lots of things that we can do to spend those assets to get within range. Now, what if you have considerably more than that amount? If you have $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 in countable assets or more, and you're wanting to become eligible for this program. Well, if you have assets, considerable assets, we've got a choice. What we can do is we can take those assets and we can move them. Now, VA has a 3-year look back rule, and they say if you move assets or gift assets away, we're going to look back within 3 years. If you've gifted assets within those 3 years from applying, you're going to be penalized. But if you move assets outside of 3 years, they're not going to look at them. So if we're strategic about this, we can take those assets and move them and wait more than 3 years before we apply for the benefit. So you can legitimately say on the VA application, have you gifted any assets within 3 years? 3 years? Nope. 3 years and 10 days? Yeah, but you can't look that far back. And so then the question becomes, how are we going to move them out of your estate? A lot of people will tell you, well, just take them and give them to your kids. Just give them to your kids. And I can tell you, I think that is one of the worst ideas that you could do. Because if you gift those assets to them, they're going to put them in their bank account. And if anything happens in their life, they go through a divorce, they have a car wreck and hurt somebody really bad, those assets not only are going to be taken away from them, they were saved for you, and they're lost, they're gone. So I believe that if we're going to look to moving assets out of your name, there's a better way to do it. And that's through what's called an asset, I call it a VA asset protection trust. And so we take the assets and we move them, but instead of giving them outright to family members, we give it to them in trust. And that way you've given it to people that you have full faith and confidence in, but you've given it to people in a way that if anything bad's going on in their life, they can't lose it for you. And it also, this asset protection trust also can act as your estate plan. So if you're needing to update your estate plan anyway, this is a way you can, in this trust, list instructions on how you want these assets to go upon your death. And you can also add provisions in there to protect the asset so that when you are gone and it goes to your kids or loved ones, whoever, it can be saved from divorces, creditors, or predators. So it's asset protected. Plus, the assets that are in there, they can avoid probate. So a lot of times it just makes sense and can become your estate planning tool. So that is one of the main ways that if you've got tremendous amount of assets over the limit that we can get you qualified, move those assets, then we wait 3 years and then apply after that time. So that, that's what we can do if you have too many assets. Now, if you don't have any wartime service, I said at the very beginning, if you don't meet the wartime service, you look at the DD 214, your loved one only served in the reserves, they served, in that weird period between the Korean War and the Vietnam War era. Unfortunately, the VA pension is just not available. If you don't, that's the one test that I can't do anything about if you don't pass it. However, just because you can't apply for VA pension doesn't mean there isn't protection that we can do for long-term care. So for a lot of my families, if they don't meet the wartime requirement, we can still work to apply to position our assets for if you ever need Medicaid. So, Medicaid has a 5-year look back, and their rules are much more stringent than VA, but we can still take your assets and we can move them to a protected environment, and then we can just wait 5 years. And so if you ever need skilled nursing, hopefully not, but if you did and 5 years had passed, whatever you had moved to this trust would not be looked at by Medicaid. And it's a way to preserve what you have so that it goes to family members and not spent down to pay for your long-term care costs. So that is definitely an option. So just because the VA isn't available doesn't mean we can't do long-term care planning. Now, as I've gone through this, I have to give you a caveat and say, disclaimer, nothing I have said today can be taken as legal advice without a consultation. I don't want you to go from here and say, well, I talked to this attorney Marcy said that I could go buy a car and I would be eligible for the benefit. I never said that. But I would be glad to talk to you one-on-one, and we can discuss and see whether any of these options make sense for you. And so, I just appreciate you learning about the VA pension. And I hope you learned something today. But again, this is just a game changer for so many families, and it just offers so many new opportunities for us to take long-term care into our own hands with that extra money. And so, if this benefit doesn't make sense for you, maybe you know someone who's a veteran who it would benefit. And so again, I recommend that if you want to go back and review any of the information that we went over, I encourage you to download my free book. It's really short. It's got lots of pictures, so it's not a lot of reading, but download my free book on the website. Johnson, it's listed right there, johnsonfirmpc.com. And if you want to talk about how this might make sense for your family, or how you might want to position yourself to be eligible for this benefit in the future, then I encourage you call our office. And as as a thank you for you've already been educated in many ways through sitting through this presentation. I will offer you a free complimentary consultation to see if this makes sense for you and your family. And if it does, then we can offer solutions and guidance on how to apply for this benefit. And again, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And if I can be of any help, please let me know. But thank you again. Have a great day. Bye.